Welcome to the Texas Values Report. This is Jonathan Saenz, president of Texas Values. Great to be with you on another glorious week in the state of Texas and America, for that matter. I had a fun little excursion that I went on yesterday, a group I got to speak to out in Fayette County, and a little detour that I took sort of on my way back that I might share later on in the show. And, look, Thanksgiving is next week. I got to figure out when we're going to have the show. I think it's going to be on Tuesday because we usually record and go live on Thursday, which I won't be doing. I'll be eating food with family and probably watching some football. Speaking of football, we're not even to the week of the Texas versus Texas A&M game, and I was speaking to a group yesterday, and a big debate almost broke out. A spirited one, with smiles. We can get along, Longhorns and Aggies, but a lot of us looking forward to that. And look, there is a ton of things going on in our country right now since the elections 2 weeks ago, including in our state. So check our website, txvalues.org. There is a huge vote coming up at the State Board of Education tomorrow, on Friday, to make sure that we don't let the left scrub biblical references in literature that have been there for decades, many years. We know there's a lot of value when people learn about the Golden Rule and the Prodigal Son and the Good Samaritan, all these things. Groups like Texas Freedom Network and others have been working for years. Every time these things come up to get renewed, they try to pull these biblical references out. They target Christianity. And the preliminary vote was on Tuesday, and of the 15-member State Board of Education body, and we won by one vote. It's that close, people. Okay, I can't get into all the details. Go to the website, email, call your State Board of Education member, and tell them to protect the Bluebonnet curriculum and make sure that the biblical references are not scrubbed and pulled out. The vote is going to be on Friday. But a lot going in our country, and someone who we talked with before the election is back, and I'm excited about it because there's even more to talk about since we last spoke, which was, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and even more to talk about since the elections. It's interesting how quickly things move in the news cycle and some of the work that we're involved. But it's a lot of good things, in my opinion, and I think Matt Schlapp would agree. Matt is the chairman of the Conservative Political Action Committee, otherwise known as CPAC. I mean, it's not only an event, it's an organization, it's a movement, it's a way of life, I'm sure, for him. But he's no stranger, and he's not new to this type of work. He's been involved in a variety of different political consulting, activist work. His wife was also a director of strategic communications for now again President-elect Trump, Mercedes Schlapp, and together they put on some wonderful events and wonderful work through CPAC and many other work that they do. And I heard they were with the president-elect last week, and so we're going to talk about a little bit about that. Matt, welcome back to the Texas Values Report.
Great to be with you again, Jonathan.
Well, you look good. You look fresh. It looks like you probably have a new suit, right? A little bounce in your step when we last talked. And not that there wasn't some optimism and expectation about how the elections would go, but considering the history of President Trump and elections, a lot for people to be concerned about, people trying to steal the vote, and all kinds of things that were, happened in 2020 that people were concerned about, whether or not there was fraud. And so, I think a lot of people were surprised that we knew before, really 7 o'clock, having breakfast the next morning after election day, that President Trump, former President Trump, was now President-elect Trump, and he was elected, and not by a slim margin. I mean, a pretty significant victory. As the days unfolded, that margin of victory grew, or when we got all the votes in. I think there's still some that are counting, actually. But what an incredible night to see all that play out, and I think helped a lot of people, too, go, okay, this isn't going to drag out. And a big reason why it didn't drag out is because, Trump won in such strong numbers. What was that night like for you?
Oh, election night was great. I was with Mercy. We were in New York City on the Newsmax set. I give Newsmax a lot of credit. They were the first ones to call Pennsylvania for Trump. They were the first
You're right.
ones.
They were. I saw that.
Yep. They called the presidency for Trump. So it was a historic night. It just takes one or two honest news outlets to keep the other ones from playing their games. And the ones that want to be accepted by all the New York media elite wouldn't call it, because Kamala Harris, I believe, had colluded with the media to say, whatever you do, don't call it that night, because they want to do across the country what we've seen in Pennsylvania, which is just keep continuing to count ballots that shouldn't be legal ballots. And this is what they've been doing in this country for a very long period of time. 2020 was an absurd demonstration of the level of corruption in our major cities, which when the Democratic Party embraced Marxism, and then when the Democratic Party took over these cities and won every elected position, and the Republicans were out, they've used that power to really mainline this whole idea of election fraud. And it's really simple. People try to make it complicated. It's really simple. It comes in all varieties. But basically, if you count a ballot, even if the person's not on the voting rolls, if you count a ballot, even if that person doesn't have a valid signature on it, then that's a license to steal for anybody who believes in those values. Now, the problem for Christians is it's asymmetrical warfare because the Republican Party, whether they know it or not, the Republican Party is animated with an activist base predominantly made up of strong Christians who don't believe in lying and don't believe in cheating. And the activist base of the Democratic Party is made up of people who believe that the ends justifies the means. So if Trump is Hitler, which they literally said, Joe Biden literally said it, Kamala Harris literally said it, then anything's justifiable to stop Hitler in their minds. And that's because we have taken the Bible out of our classrooms and we haven't taught people proper moral theology. And we thought that we were all told that, we don't want to proselytize in a public space and then there'll be neutrality. And then we realized instead of there being neutrality, they're bringing in literally Satan ball and Satanism and transgenderism and sexual insanity to our children. So it's all wrapped up in the simple thing called truth, and I'd like to grab it back and put it in our classrooms and have it animate our society.
No, look, and you're absolutely right, and that's what I think is important for people to understand. Sometimes they think if we're not talking about these issues, then these things just won't get talked about, and as if the space won't get filled by something else. I mean, there's this constant tug of war. So if you remove one thing, they're going to try to replace it with another. It's not just as simple as, to your point, we need to just focus on, in the classroom, particularly on, educating kids about math and science. And I think that's incredibly important, right? But so what they do is they remove things that are historically relevant, that are facts, right? As it relates to issues of faith, as it relates to our Judeo-Christian heritage and values, as it relates to things in literature that we know come from the Bible, that were used as inspirations for those things to be talked about, those stories to be written, that people in literature, Shakespeare, to name one, okay? It's clear the connections there. And so what they really want to do is sort of rewrite history or act like that never happened, and scrub all those things, and then fill it with their own ideology, which is based in not science, even though they want to tell us to trust the science. That's out the window, because when you try to convince people that a man is now a woman and, to go into whatever bathroom or to play in women's sports, we know they've gone way beyond, and they've left the argument about this being an issue of science and biology. But look, a lot of those things were expressed in the election results, right? I mean, here in Texas, Trump ran several ads highlighting the fact that Kamala Harris was for tax dollars being spent for sex change surgeries for people in the military, for illegal aliens. I mean, it was out of control, right? And he sees that. Right now, they want to backtrack and say, we weren't focusing on that in the campaign. Nonsense. I mean, this has been a big issue for them for quite some time, and they tried to cash in on it year in and year out, and they finally came up empty-handed on these issues because they've gone too far. But Trump was very wise to focus on that and to not be afraid to get into some of this icky stuff or whatever that people don't always like to talk about. But, when you and I first met, it was related to the God's Not Dead movie, which was about having Christians come out and vote. Really, hopefully we would see them turn out in higher numbers. There's some data out there that suggests that. I know there's some really strong data that has concluded that Trump won the Catholic vote, which, to see that block, and not that they're all the same, if you will, and that includes me as a Catholic myself, but there is a shift there, right? And I think it relates to how the Democratic parties has gone so left and so extreme on some of these values issues that, it's made it much easier for, some of the people in that Catholic bloc, places like Pennsylvania and others, to say, hey, this isn't about party. This is about our values.
Yeah, that's right. Now, look, the data is a little fuzzy. I think polling has become very fuzzy. Exit polling, asking people after they voted who they voted for and, what faith they are and stuff. It's a little bit fuzzy. So it's just so your viewers understand, it's impossible to have exact data,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't have won states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan if you didn't win the Catholic vote. And that's just the way it is. And the Catholic vote is half of it is a swing constituency. Half of it, it's all about church attendance. If you go to church, these people are overwhelmingly conservative, overwhelmingly pro-life and Republican. If you are an infrequent church attender and you're more of a cultural Catholic, well, you're a Catholic because your grandfather was Catholic or whatever your story is, they're a swing constituency. They can go one way or the other. And what I thought was really interesting is the war on faith lost in this election.
Yeah.
The war on the unborn child lost in this election. The war on the innocence of our children through transgender extremism through our curriculum lost. So, the one thing Kamala Harris actually didn't read a teleprompter on was her zeal and zest to make sure every abortion in this country that could possibly happen happened. You could just see she got animated.
Yeah.
And the media was saying this was going to carry her into the White House. And instead, I actually think it's what prevented her from getting to the White House. Now, I can't know that perfectly, but I can understand that there are a lot of liberals in this country who like big government. They don't like maybe the Second Amendment, but they're go to church Christians and they're Bible reading Christians, and they don't like this idea of this abortion extremism. Remember, the Democratic Party was the home of the immigrant. It was the home of the immigrant Catholic. The Democratic Party was the home of a lot of evangelical Christians in the South. This was their home, and the Democratic Party has done everything they could to tell people of faith that they're not welcome. They took God out of their platform. They sometimes pray at their events, and they're very interesting prayers, and I guess I'll leave it there. And so all these immigrants and other people that believe that Christian principles, biblical truths are very important in the raising of children, which it sounds like you and I both believe in. They're kicked out of this party, and the Republican Party is smart to grab them. And I think we've done a good job of that. There's a lot of change in this country politically. Most of that change.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Benefit of the Republican Party.
Yeah, well, and look, this is what happens too in presidential elections. You don't see quite the same allegiance to party. You see a lot more voters who, don't vote every 4 years, or if they do, it's just every 4 years, right? So there's a lot more, things in play in the middle, if you will, or, however you want to characterize it. And, look, a lot of those people were motivated by what was going on with the economy, what was going on with border security, right? I mean, did they even get to the point of thinking about the issue of abortion? Many of them did not, but you're right. I mean, Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party, many of them, they went all in, right, with the religion of abortion, transgenderism, all these different things that have, are very extreme, and you have a small percentage. But that's been what they think has been carrying them all along, and it's probably gotten them some support, in those bases. But overall, when you get to a presidential election, that is not what people care about. Even people that are lesbian and gay think some of this transgender stuff has gone too far. And look, it got exposed, right? And thank goodness that it did. And hopefully we'll see things swing back. But that, we're talking about these issues more, and now people are understanding, how bad it can be and how it can impact people in such a negative way. So Trump wins. You got to celebrate. All right. He had some people over at Mar-a-Lago and some other places. I was looking at your social media account and X and so on. Looks like you had a nice tuxedo there with your wife and some, other important people, Speaker Johnson and President-elect Trump, if I can say it that way. I got to remind myself of that. Real quick, though, on Pennsylvania. I mean, the significance of that state for the election, but as we recall, this is where he was almost assassinated.
Yeah, right.
It just is striking to me. How, and I hate to say it this way. I hate to say that it backfired on them, but I mean, that was someone's strategy. A lot of people's strategy was to take him out in Pennsylvania. And what he ended up doing was, that was something that was sort of a rallying point, and I think had a huge impact on him winning in Pennsylvania. It's to think about where we were in July. But we'll move forward. Tell us about the celebrations. What was the mood like there? Looked like you guys were having a lot of fun.
Yeah, we were.
But a lot of people that care about this country.
Yeah, it was great to be with the president. He was in a great mood. Hopefully he's getting a little bit of rest. I mean, I've never seen somebody campaign as hard as him until I saw Bob Dole. I remember Bob Dole did a 24-hour campaign at the end where he just did, rallies throughout the day and throughout the night. Now, Trump's are much bigger. They're the biggest rallies we've ever seen in this country's history. They're like revivals in a lot of ways.
Right.
And it was great to be with him. It was great for our CPAC community to be able to be with him. We had great demand to be at the event, and it's become, America's palace. Mar-a-Lago was given by this wealthy woman to the United States government to act as a Southern White House. And the government did what it does best. It let it fall into disrepair. They couldn't figure out how to actually do it. There was some strategic or some physical challenges. It's very close to a bridge there, and they didn't know if security was going to work, and blah, blah, blah. So Donald Trump tried to buy it once, and they said no. And then they came back to him and said, would you buy it for this amount? And he said no, because you've let it fall apart. And then I think he basically got it for $8 or $9 million at the end. And it's just a stunning property, and it's really our palace. So when people come there, and I got to watch a lot of our supporters kind of file in, I mean, it's a beautiful moment for them. It's just a beautiful property. If you haven't been there, you need to get there. You have to be invited to get there, but it's a stunning place, and we had a great time, and we talked about why we won and what we have to do now. The big thing with CPAC is we've always been a grassroots organization. We're reinvigorated, and it's all about what we have to do to save the country. So we did celebrate. We had a black tie gala, but we quickly moved on to the stuff we have to do to get the country back on track. And we had great speakers, Byron Donalds, Brendan Carr, who was designated the FCC chairman by the president as we were there. Vivek Ramaswamy, just everyone. Mercy and I got to talk to Elon Musk at some length. So it was just a great couple of days, and it's really exciting for the people at Mar-a-Lago to really watch the government get staffed up before their very eyes. I don't think this has really ever happened in our history. It's like, it would be like being at the tavern watching George Washington assemble his cabinet. It's a pretty amazing thing.
Well, and not a surprise, I think, for a lot of people that those folks out there that were key to his reelection, that were out there talking and, generating support and carrying the message, are now going to be a part not only of that transition, but moving forward. And key to his success, people that he knows he can trust, he can count on, that are committed to these common goals and interests. We're talking with Matt Schlapp. He is the chairman of CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee. They do wonderful events. They're involved in grassroots work, probably one of the most well-known organizations of its type across the country. And you guys are having a good couple of weeks. Not that that's unusual, but it's nice when you've done so much work. And by the way, maybe you can put in a good word for me. I'd love to make it out to Mar-a-Lago for my first time.
Oh, you need to, man.
We had one of our
we'll
board
get you
members
down there.
We had one of our board members, John Bean, that was at one of the other events I think that took place. But a little bit of time to celebrate, to enjoy each other, and then right to work. I mean, some of these key appointees, look, they're going to have my support and yours and others, but they're, striking fear in some people, people like Matt Gaetz for Attorney General and others, right? The new border czar, right? And for good reasons. And sadly, looks like some Republicans are already voicing some opposition or some concern. But I would imagine, and look, the inauguration, January 20th, I plan to be there. But between now and then, setting things up, sort of lining up the votes and all that is going to be very important so these people can get to work and we can get those other people out that have been causing so much trouble.
That's right. Yeah, it's really beyond the pale that Republican senators would be coming out against Trump nominees before they've even had a hearing. I mean, this is like just shows you how we've lost so much comedy in our politics. There's a decency to at least hearing both sides out. So, being against Matt Gaetz, which Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski I've read. I haven't heard them say it, but I'm assuming the reporting is correct that they're already against him. I think they should let him have his hearing. Remember, DOJ looked at Matt Gaetz, much like Bob Mueller looked at Donald Trump in every conceivable way. I think they took 3 years or nearly 3 years with a criminal probe of Matt Gaetz because the charges are alarming. But guess what Merrick Garland found at the end of 3 years? No crimes, nothing, yeah. Not even a report to leak that was nasty. So the reason why there's a congressional ethics report is that obviously the Democrats and Kevin McCarthy and other Republicans who hate Matt Gaetz, and Matt Gaetz has enemies within the Republican camp. I do too. If you're a consequential person in this day and age, even some people on your own squad are mad at you because you push them, make it uncomfortable for them in this time when so much is at stake. So if Merrick Garland couldn't find anything wrong on Matt Gaetz, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good talking point, and you could probably take that to the bank for anybody else that's paying attention. But look, it's important though to get it worked out. Okay, people, talk about it, air your concerns or whatever, because that vote will be coming up soon. And look, one of the first things I hope we see happen is that the Department of Justice drops this indictment and this prosecution against Dr. Heim. This is a doctor here in Texas who exposed Texas Children's Hospital when they said, we're not doing gender transition surgeries on kids. He was a resident at the time. He blew the whistle on that. And now the Department of Justice has been after him for several years. He could end up in jail for 10 years for simply telling the truth. And so I hope that's one of the first things that we see in others along the way. I want to ask you, though, about Texas. I know you were here for the God's Not Dead red carpet event and other things that you care about. CPAC has had its event in Texas several times. Ted Cruz race, huge, just like Trump. Ted Cruz won the Hispanic vote and a whole lot of other counties, 240 or so out of 254. And look, I know the Republicans have taken back the Senate. That Ted Cruz race, though, I think in a lot of ways was huge, not only for Texas, but the country and the issues and the values you and I care about. What were your takeaways?
It's an amazing victory. He's a incredibly important senator, so good job, Texas. My biggest takeaway on Texas is that Florida and Texas have become redder because the American people have voted with their feet and they want to live in freedom, and they love what they heard about the governors of Texas and Florida during all the Chinese corona madness, and so that's made the states better. I think there's a lot of Republicans, more establishment Republicans inside both states who like to act like these states are slipping away from us because they don't like this solid conservatism coming out of the leaders there. And they want to act like the new Hispanic and immigrant populations are pining for socialism. But what you actually find in both those states is that there's a significant portion of those Hispanic populations that are solidly conservative. They might not know it. They might not use the word. They might not use the word Republican, but their values represent what we fight for. And when they really got a chance to see Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump or Ted Cruz versus his also ran opponent, Ted Cruz is just destroying all these Democrats who think they're on the national stage. No one talks about Beto, except Beto keeps making the New York Times crossword puzzle, which I'm addicted to, because they think they're going to resurrect Beto. I don't think so. I think Beto's done.
I almost hope they do. They want to spend more of that money and lose for a fourth time. And you know what's interesting? Ted Cruz said this in his victory speech, if you will, and when I think the state was called. And you're right. I saw Newsmax call Pennsylvania first. I'm like, yes. I think CNN waited until, I don't know when it was the next day. Nonetheless, Ted Cruz said, thank you, George Soros, for spending $100 million or whatever in Texas, because maybe that was less money and opportunity they had to, to try to push those issues in other states and in the presidential race. But it was close at one point. And I'm not saying that, I think that it legitimately was. And then people started paying attention more. Same with Senator Cruz. He dug into the issues, the weaknesses, and the liberal positions of Colin Allred, was not afraid to expose them. The Save Women's Sports issue was huge. If you didn't see, and you probably did, the ad, because Colin Allred was a former football player, where they, have someone depicted as him tackling this girl because of his position and not supporting women on these issues and being against the Save Women's Sports movement. I think that ad and that whole effort by Ted Cruz in his Colin Allred's position is probably what sunk him, certainly those last 2 weeks. And so
I agree with you.
But all right, we're about to run out of time. Matt, really appreciate the work that you do. I'm excited for what's ahead. We've got some important work to do. Could be, 4 years of President Trump, but that window, I know can be a lot shorter to get out of the gate quickly and get something done. So I hope I see you at the inauguration or maybe before then.
I want everyone to come to CPAC in February. If you can't make the inauguration, which is a mostly outdoor affair, come to CPAC in February, a couple of weeks after the inauguration, a mostly completely indoor heated affair where the government will be assembled. I think not only will President Trump speak to us, but most of his major cabinet secretaries and advisors will speak to us, as well as kind of the conservative people on TV and in media we love and online, and the great congressmen and senators, of which there needs to be more, will come speak to us. So yes, you should be there. If you don't get to the inauguration, come to CPAC. If you go to the inauguration and you want more, come to CPAC in February and go to cpac.org to get signed up.
We'll drop a link to it, but just telling people that it's an indoor heated event in February in D.C. for Texans, that's going to be a big selling point, because I know I just about had my toes froze standing outside the U.S. Supreme Court one time because as a Texan, I didn't dress appropriately nonetheless. Right. Listen, it has been a great conversation. Matt Schlapp, the chairman of CPAC, has been our guest today on the Texas Values Report. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Okay, I'm out of time, but go to our website, check out the State Board of Education vote that is on Friday, tomorrow. The Bible survived by one vote, okay? Somebody could get pressured. I'm just saying, you don't know what's going to happen. Take nothing for granted. Call, email your State Board of Education member. Go to our website. You need to figure out who that is. All right, there's 15 members. Look, there's enough Republicans if you want to get, party discussions about this, but 3 of the Republicans voted against it on Tuesday. A lot of people are shocked by that. I'm sure they're hearing from their constituents who are upset. So check that out, send that message, and hopefully the vote goes well. Tomorrow, we've got 2 events I want to run through real quick. Fort Worth Lunch and Learn for Christmas, celebrating Christmas. That is Saturday, December 7th. That's a lunch event at Mexican Inn Café. Then on Sunday, that same weekend in the evening, a Christmas dinner reception with Riley Gaines. Okay? I love seeing her. She's fantastic. She's all over the place. We snagged her. She was like, I think I can squeeze you in on, Sunday, December 8th. We're like, done. Okay, so those tickets are going to sell out quickly. That's at Grace Woodlands Church, December 8th, evening, Christmas dinner, and we got some other special stuff planned for that. But Riley Gaines, the hero, the leader of the Save Women's Sports movement, and a whole lot of other issues that she cares about. Listen, I'm out of time, but if you see value in our work as we get close to the end of the year and we get close to the end of this month, we need your donations in order to do the work we do. We've had people at the State Board of Education all week. I was down there a little bit on Tuesday. We have to have the resources in order to do what we do, get more people involved, cover the different expenses, travel, all those things that go into the work that we do. So please go to txvalues.org, make a tax-deductible donation today. And that's how together we can protect faith, family, and freedom in Texas. And we'll talk to you next week on the Texas Values Report.